welcome to the processing step usage in labels, which I'm going to present, Frank Finke, together with my colleague Pascal. We will present you how processing steps is actually used in the production or in the workflow related to labels specifically. So what are the short introduction? What are processing steps? It's actually an ISO standard that was initiated by members of the Ghent work group with the intention to actually make the workflow more reliable when it comes to communication outside of the graphics of the file itself. So what does that mean? We are adding data for production steps to the processing, the PDF file, and the goal is actually to improve communication between stakeholders of the production process. That means people that are working on the design, that are making the decisions on what the content is. And so it's also providers, consumers, but also the software and the hardware that is using those files to automate the whole process from the beginning to the end. And the ultimate goal of this whole thing is actually to reduce the risk of compromising on failures so that no work has to be redone or costs are made that should have been not made, etc. So Pascal, what we will present in this webinar?
So Frank, in this webinar, we will learn how people, software and hardware can use processing steps to communicate. And together with you, we have worked out 3 ways how to present the processing steps. So we're going to apply it in the 3 major phases of the label production. The first phase will be design. In the second phase, we will use processing steps in Prepress. And then we are also going to use the data in the graphic file that has been made available for production and inspection. So let's have a look to design label artwork. And if I'm right, Frank, then most people that are designing are going to use a design application like Adobe Illustrator.
Yes. So that's also why we do the first presentation using Adobe Illustrator, where we installed some plugins that will aid us to actually work with the processing steps inside of the design. What you see here is actually a label that we already prepared. So we added a legend, dimensions, etc., all the information that you want to communicate together with your graphics to the prepress, so that step and repeat and stuff like that is actually processed correctly. Yeah. So Pascal, first of all, so we added the legend to the file, and now we're going to assign the processing steps to legend. So open the processing steps for objects window.
So indeed, I'm going to use a plugin that I have installed. So that is available for Illustrator as well. There we go.
Yes. So it's as simply now, so Pascal made a selection. We just now select the processing step we want to assign. In this case, it's legend. We just apply set. And now, okay, the processing step has been assigned. And given that processing steps are linked to layers, we actually see that the software automatically created the legend layer on top of the file. And so that now contains all the legend data. Similar, we will actually now do the same for cutting and dimensions. So now select all the dimension software and again apply the dimension processing step to it. Okay. And third of all, so you now also see the dimension layer which is created. And third of all, we will assign the cutting to the correct processing step. For that, we select the cutter guide. And we select the structural processing step, where we need also to assign the subtype cutting. And again, we just apply, we apply it. And so now after these 3 easy steps, we actually, so now we have 3 extra layers, the legend layer, the dimension layer, and the structural. We also automatically created a spot color Yes, for the structural, because normally all the all the processing step needs specific spot colors for it, so that's also automatically taken care for you. So now let's take a look at the actual, so we just assigned the processing steps, and now we're going to look at the overall processing step again in the layer metadata, so that we can see how the layers and the processing steps actually how they're actually applied to the job. Here we see, for example, that your layer called structural cutting has been assigned a structural processing step and a cutting subtype, the same for dimensions and legends. Yeah, so just to check whether everything has been applied correctly, we're going to do a pre-flight to assure that everything is now according to the specs. And we see there is still a mistake. Well, there is some error, and on the dimension layer, we see that the software found some errors. For example, the first error, it found that in the layer dimension, there should not be any usage of document colorants, and we can select to fix it by just using only one colorant in the structural. We can do all these fixes one by one, or just do them all, or fix all, or re-flight because we just fixed it and see that everything is now okay. So what did we just now do? We actually showed that setting processing steps in the design phase is easy, and in the end, it will speed up the standardization and automation process in the next steps we're going to show you. We also noticed that there is a big interest from global brand owners to force design agencies to apply these steps in this phase so that they can actually make advantages in cost reduction of approval cycles in the big meaning of the word. So by applying all of this, they can easily verify that everything has been set correctly, and they know that the rest of the process will act or continue smoothly. So Pascal, will you now show what the next step is if you take this artwork into a Prepress software and then continue from there on?
Yes, for sure. And in the market, there are many professional Prepress softwares that's actually supporting the processing steps. We have chosen to work with PAX and with Cloudflow for that. So here you see the design that was saved in Illustrator, and we opened that into PAX. If you look to the right-hand side, and I'm highlighting it, you will actually notice that the processing steps that were set by the design agency are coming in as well. And in fact, I am able now to use this information to do pre-flighting, but I can also automate processes based on that. Now, I am working, of course, in an English operating system and an English version of an application, but processing steps is independent from language, from culture. So this is very interesting as well. So here I created an action list, for instance, that just like in Illustrator may pre-flight, if there are still errors accordingly. I'm not going to repeat that because the way how you are going to fix is exactly the same as in Illustrator. But I also have the possibility to, based on these processing steps, to say, look, I'm going to search if there are dimensions and delete them, or legends, because they are related to the design and not to a legend that should be applied for printing on it. And thus, when I'm executing, I can actually take my raw design, and that's it.
Yes.
Okay.
And Pascal, like you stressed, it's really the important thing here is that we selected all the information just by the processing step and not by any convention like, well, the layer should be called A or B. So that's really the big advantage of processing steps in this case.
Yeah. So what I can do is I can save my modifications, which I've done. And in Prepress, I may use now, I can also define Prepress related processing steps. For instance, label printers have the mouthful of producing pouches as well. That apparently seems to be a very hot topic. And let's say I'm going to make a step and repeat. So I'm going to do that very quickly. So there we go. I'm just going to drag and drop the file into it. There you go. I will make the orientation correct, for instance, 2 by 5. There we go. Voila. I'm just going to bring some additional information to it so that I'm able to show it quickly. I can apparently also load that from presets if that was necessary. But let's make it a little bit more complicated. We're going to make it staggered. And thus, that means that somehow people at the end, when they are going to produce flexo plates, for instance, they would like to cut also these flexo plates in an automated way. And thus, we have to provide, without processing steps, a different file to that cutter. But if that cutting machine was able, a cutting table was able to support the processing steps, I can actually use the same file format, to indicate where the cutting information is. So how do I do that? Well, in this application here, we are going to go to the staggered cutting options. I can actually set all of my options that I want over here. And at the end, I am going to just ensure that I more or less give the right settings, for instance, under 75 degrees, for instance, and I'm going to create it. And in fact, so it selects, or it creates the application, the cutting lines, but it also, like you see on the right-hand side, and which I'm highlighting and making bigger right now, also say, look, these are informations that can be used during the plate making process, where it says it is indeed plate making, it is cutting information for your plate, and actually it is the same for all separations, eventually indicating that you can also set it for every separation individually. And in this way, I am showing how I can use processing steps delivered from a design and, for instance, pre-flight and clean up the artwork, but at the same time using the processing steps in a pouch label with communication towards plate optimization software, for instance, or even plate cutting machines as well.
Yeah, so that's indeed very interesting, Pascal, because like this, if you start nesting these flexo plates in a larger setup, you actually have the information to optimize the way these things are nested without any operator has to type in or select a new contour again. So that's really interesting. And indeed, we have also seen in our own software, if you try to implement that, it's just a fluent workflow with little operator intervention to make that all work. Now,
so I think we also made a third demonstration as well. Processing steps actually related to production and inspection systems. And in the beginning of our web session, we said that brand owners are very interested in processing steps. We see a very huge interest for pharmaceutical brand owners, and thus we are going to switch quickly to a pharma label. For instance, the label over here, it is quite, let's say, standard. It's black and white. If I look to the separations, for instance, that were in use black, there is a key line defined. There were already dimensions on it as well. All right, let's have a look here. Imagine that for inspection purposes, I have to communicate the location of the barcode, for instance. Well, then I could, if I don't have processing steps, invent my own method that is most likely going to work in my company. But imagine that I print here and finish somewhere else. And I know that the machines can be interconnected using processing steps. So what I'm going to do then is I'm just going to say, look, here you find a little rectangle, and let's close some windows, that I actually going to give a color. For instance, I'm just going to say this is for inspection, for instance, and using the application, I'm going to say, look, I want to have it on a layer. So it's an French company, so inspection, voilà. So we are going to add it. Oh, and not double N, there we go. But independently from the language, I can also tell that the processing step of positioning and barcode indication should be communicated. When I have done this, I can actually save all my modifications, and I can actually push that through a workflow solution. So in our example here, we are going to use Cloudflow from Hybrid Software. So I'm going to submit it into my Cloudflow workflow. So I'm going to tell, look, this is the design that I want to push, and it should generate a step and repeat with information coming from an ERP and MIS system, but also based on the processing steps, define a cutter line for a laser cutter, for instance, or a slitting machine, or whatever you want to use it, and also provide an additional file that indicates from the step and repeat where inspections should be performed with the camera systems. So I'm going to submit that. So everything happens live. So you will see after a couple of seconds that it is coming in. So the workflow is executed. It made a step and repeat. It adds some marks to it. And using the processing steps, it is actually now delivering the different files. So if I'm going back.
Yeah, Pascal, hold on for a minute. Can you actually show how the export die is working?
Yes, I can show how export die is working. So within a workflow system that supports the processing steps, you may find nodes, actions, for instance, that can say, look, within the PDF, the PDF file, you are going to search for cat information that has been marked with processing steps that represent cut lines and crease lines. And actually, I am telling to output that in a separate file. And actually, for the inspection system, I can do the same thing as well.
Yes. And again, like we highlighted before, the export die is not saying I want a layer by name. It's really just saying, give me the information that is marked with that processing step,
exactly,
which is a standard. So this workflow works for every design which is marked with that processing step.
Yes, exactly. So the workflow has run. So I can now go back to PAX, for instance, and I can eventually see the step and repeat and do inspection on the step and repeat. Yeah, so as you can see, we created a live step and repeat with marks, everything applied on it. But using the processing steps, I also created a cutter line, yeah, that can be provided to a tool maker or even to a laser cutting machine. And I also created a PDF file that can be delivered to the inspection camera solution. And as you can see, still into the PDF file, we are going to say, yes, it are positions for barcodes, but we do not only have one, like it was in the OneUp file, but multiple ones that should be inspected. And in this way, I come to the end of my 3 phases of showing processing steps in design, into prepress, and also into production and inspection. So actually, Frank, what is your conclusion?
Yeah. So with all these short demonstrations we gave, we actually showed you that we establish a reliable communication between the stakeholders about production of a specific label. And that means we assign a cutting line where applicable. We mark info panels so that they can actually be removed during pre-press because they're not really needed in pre-press. We can assign embellishments if that needed, like gold foil or stamping. And like we showed just recently, we can also highlight inspection regions so that some of your tools know where to look and can compare the actual printed data with the data in the prepress files. Like this, the label industry can actually build a reliable, interactive, and automated processes regardless of people. That means if people come and go in your company, they all follow the same standard and you don't have to explain what your way of working is. It's just simply following all the standards. We have shown that several software vendors actually follow support processing steps and as such automatically communicate with each other, and you don't need to reconfigure depending on where your file comes from. Hardware is something we see coming up now, and it allows you to actually also connect with your hardware, which can be done in two ways. Either your hardware will start supporting processing steps out of the box and you can just send the PDF file there, or with your workflow software, you can actually extract for example, the PDF, the cut contours, convert to HPGL or some other format, and then send it to your quote unquote legacy hardware to also just work together with your incoming file. But in the end, it is still a fully automated process based on processing steps. And in the end, it also connects companies because they all follow the same standard. And you can just communicate, you give them a file and the other company will actually understand what you meant with the content of the file. And so just to conclude, are you going to Drupal, Pascal?
Yes, Frank, I'm going to Drupal, and I would recommend all the attendees here or the people that are going to watch it later in the upcoming days to talk to your tech provider, because they definitely all know about processing steps and what it means in standardization, reliability solutions as well. So on behalf of Frank and myself, but also of all the members of the Gantt work group, of even those people using these solutions already, thank you very much for your attention, and see you soon again in an upcoming event. Thank you and goodbye.